A captain's power is absolute at sea, but Captain Arthur Bishop made one fatal miscalculation. He saw a 17-year-old black girl reading a book in stateroom 412B and declared her a security risk. He refused to sail. He demanded she be removed. What he didn't know? That teenager was Chloe Sinclair, daughter of the billionaire who just bought the entire cruise line. Within minutes, her father didn't just fire the captain. He recalled every single ship in the Pinnacle fleet. Hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of passengers, a 50 million shutdown. All because one man chose prejudice over professionalism. This is the story of how a 17-year-old grounded an empire. Watch to see the boardroom takedown that changed the cruise industry forever. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. A cruise ship captain's word is law in the middle of the ocean. His authority is absolute, his decisions unquestionable. But what happens when that authority is fueled by raw, ugly prejudice? What happens when a decorated veteran, Captain Arthur Bishop of Pinnacle Cruises, looks at a 17-year-old girl and sees not a passenger, but a threat? He refused to sail. He drew a line in the sand, confident in his power. He didn't know that the quiet black teenager in standard stateroom 412B, Chloe Sinclair, wasn't just any passenger. She held a secret, a connection so powerful that in a matter of minutes, she wouldn't just challenge his authority. She would ground his entire world. This is the story of how one girl's quiet dignity toppled an empire of arrogance. The air in the gangway at Port Canaveral, Terminal 10, was stale, a familiar mix of recycled air conditioning and the faint metallic scent of diesel fuel. It was the smell of transit, of temporary spaces between places. For 17-year-old Chloe Sinclair, it was the smell of anonymity, and she savored it. Dressed in a simple gray hoodie, dark jeans, and with a pair of well-worn Bose headphones around her neck, she blended seamlessly into the river of passengers, flowing into the belly of the Pinnacle Star. She was just another face in the crowd. A teenager heading to Cozumel, and that's exactly how she wanted it. Her ticket, booked under the simple name C. Sinclair, was for stateroom 412B, an interior stateroom. She didn't mind. Her adoptive father, Marcus, had offered to book her in the suite deck, but she'd refused. "I need to see it how everyone else does, Dad," she had explained over the phone. "No special treatment." That's the entire point. Marcus Sinclair, a man whose name was a whisper in the halls of finance and a thunderclap in boardrooms, had recently become the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Cruises. The acquisition was hostile, swift, and brutal. He had seen a legacy cruise line rotting from the inside out with inefficiency, and more alarmingly, a culture of customer contempt. His plan was to rebuild it from the ground up. And Chloe's trip was the first secret step, a grassroots audit. She was his eyes and ears, tasked with observing everything, from the cleanliness of the public restrooms to the morale of the ship's crew. As she found her stateroom, she gave a small, polite smile to the neighbor whose door was open and the man in the hallway, sliding past them to her designated spot. She stored her small bag in the closet, pulled out a paperback novel, and settled in. The pre-departure symphony began. The clicking of stateroom doors, the murmur of 100 conversations, the cheerful, slightly strained chimes of the steward call button. Up in the ship's bridge, the atmosphere was markedly different. Captain Arthur Bishop was performing his pre-departure checks with a practiced, almost bored efficiency that came from 25 years of sailing. Bishop was a captain of the old guard. He had silver temples, a jaw that seemed permanently set in a look of mild disapproval, and a belief that he was the last bastion of true authority in an increasingly soft world. He saw the new customer is always right initiatives and diversity training seminars as insults to his profession. His first officer, Ryan Davis, was 32, half Bishop's age, and 10 times more anxious. He respected Bishop's technical skill, but was often unnerved by his captain's simmering resentment. "Last of the stragglers coming on now," Ryan said, glancing at the small monitor that showed the gangway camera. "Should be able to cast off on time." Bishop grunted, not looking up from his checklist. "Let's see if they can manage that. This generation thinks on time is a suggestion." He initialed a form on his clipboard with a sharp, angry flick of the wrist. "Back in my day, we respected schedules. We respected authority." Elena Ramirez, the head of guest services, was at the main atrium, her smile a masterclass in professional warmth. She had been with Pinnacle Cruises for a decade and had seen her fair share of difficult captains. But Captain Bishop was in a league of his own. She'd learned to manage him with a careful blend of deference and strategic avoidance. As the final passenger boarded, Elena began her head count. She walked down the decks, her eyes scanning each stateroom hallway. She noticed the girl in 412B, absorbed in her book. There was a quiet intensity about her, a stillness that stood out amid the travel chaos. Elena offered a warm smile as she passed. The girl looked up, her eyes bright and intelligent, and returned a small, genuine smile of her own. Just as Elena was about to signal to the embarkation staff that the ship was secure, Captain Bishop's voice crackled over the internal phone. "Elena, a word." "Go ahead, Captain," she answered, her voice professional, not over the phone. "Up here now?" The line clicked dead. Elena sighed, the plastic smile momentarily dropping. She exchanged a look with another steward who gave a subtle roll of her eyes. Everyone knew what a summons from Bishop meant. She walked the length of the deck to the crew elevator leading to the bridge. The heavy reinforced door was slightly ajar. "Captain," she said, poking her head in. Bishop didn't turn around. He was staring at the same security monitor Ryan had been watching earlier, which now showed a live feed of the passengers. His finger was pressed against the screen, tapping the image of a young woman in a gray hoodie. "Stateroom 412B, he said, his voice low and hard. "Who is she?" Elena was taken aback. "She's a passenger, Captain. Her name is Sinclair, I believe. Boarding card checked out. Everything's in order." Bishop finally turned, his blue eyes cold as ice chips. "She's been fidgeting, looking around. I've been watching her on the monitor. She looks nervous, suspicious." Ryan Davis, the first officer, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He'd been watching the same monitor. The girl had looked around when she first sat down, the way every passenger does. She wasn't fidgeting. She was turning the page of her book. Elena knew this was a fabrication. "Captain, with all due respect, she's just reading." "She seems perfectly calm to me." Bishop's gaze hardened. "Your job is to serve drinks, Elena. My job is to assess threats. And I am telling you, I am not comfortable with that passenger on my ship." The implication hung thick and poisonous in the small bridge. He wasn't just talking about her behavior. Chloe Sinclair was one of only a handful of black passengers on the main decks. Bishop's suspicion was a thinly veiled excuse. A dog whistle that Elena had heard from him before in hushed tones and bitter asides, but never so openly. Never directed with such clear intent. "Captain, there is no reason, absolutely no reason to single her out," Elena said, her voice dropping but gaining a firm, steely edge. "I will not be a part of this." "You don't have to be," Bishop snapped, his face reddening. He unbuckled his harness with a decisive click. "Because we're not going anywhere until she's off this ship." He stood up, his large frame filling the cramped bridge, and pushed past Elena into the passenger deck. The battle line had been drawn, and every passenger on Pinnacle Cruises' voyage 915 to Cozumel was now sitting directly on top of it. Chloe Sinclair looked up from her book, a flicker of confusion in her eyes, as the imposing figure of the captain stopped directly in front of her stateroom hallway. The quiet anonymity she had cherished was about to be violently shattered. The deck, which had been buzzing with the low hum of anticipation, fell into a confused silence. A captain emerging from the bridge was not unusual, but one who did so with a face like a thundercloud, marching down the hallway with grim purpose, was a signal that something was wrong. Captain Bishop stopped at stateroom 412B, his polished black shoes almost touching the threshold. Chloe's door was ajar. The captain's shadow fell across the pages of her novel. "Ma'am?" he said, the word ma'am laced with a condescending bite, usually reserved for a child being scolded. "I'm going to need you to come with me." Chloe slowly lowered her book. She took a moment to process the situation, her expression shifting from mild surprise to careful neutrality. She removed her headphones, letting them rest on her shoulders. "Is there a problem, Captain?" she asked, her voice calm and even. "That's what we're going to determine," Bishop replied brusquely. "Off the ship now." The man in the next room, a businessman in a crisp suit, looked from Bishop to Chloe, his annoyance palpable. Hey, what's going on? We're trying to depart here. Bishop shot him a venomous glare. I am the captain of this ship, sir. I will handle this. Ma'am, let's go. He gestured impatiently with his head toward the front of the ship. Chloe didn't move. She met his gaze directly, and for the first time Bishop saw not the nervous teenager he had imagined, but a young woman of formidable composure. Captain, she said, her voice still quiet, but now carrying a weight that made nearby passengers lean in to listen. You haven't stated a reason for this request. Am I being removed from this cruise? You're being asked to disembark for a security screening. Bishop lied, his voice rising in volume. He was used to immediate, unquestioning obedience. This quiet resistance was infuriating him. Your behavior was deemed suspicious. A small scoff escaped from a passenger in the opposite hallway. The word suspicious echoed in the now silent deck. Everyone had seen Chloe. She had boarded, sat down, and opened a book. The only suspicious thing about her, it seemed to many, was the color of her skin. Elena Ramirez had followed Bishop down the hallway. She stepped forward, placing herself slightly between the captain and the seated teenager. Captain Bishop, she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. You can't do this. You have no grounds. I have every ground, he boomed, turning on her. It's called my authority as pilot in command. Now get out of my way or I'll have you written up for insubordination. The threat was real. A write-up from a senior captain could be a career killer. But Elena saw Chloe's face, calm and resolute, and she saw Bishop's, twisted with an ugly, irrational anger. She held her ground. You'll have to go through me then, Elena said, her voice no longer a whisper. It was clear and strong. Because I will not stand here and watch you harass a passenger. The hallway erupted in murmurs. Phones were starting to emerge, the small red dots of recording lights winking on like fireflies in the dim light. Ryan Davis, the first officer, watched the entire scene unfold on the bridge monitor, his stomach churning. He knew what Bishop was doing was wrong. It was a gross abuse of power, a blatant act of prejudice. Every instinct screamed at him to intervene, to get on the intercom and countermand his captain. But fear held him in place. Bishop was a legend at the cruise line, a man with friends in high places. To cross him was to commit career suicide. So Ryan just sat there, a silent, ashamed witness. Back in 412B, Chloe slowly emerged from her stateroom. She wasn't surrendering. She was taking control. She stood up, a slender figure who nonetheless seemed to command the space around her. She was several inches shorter than Bishop, yet she looked him directly in the eye, her gaze unwavering. Fine, she said. Let's talk about my suspicious behavior. Please tell me exactly what I did. She gestured to the passengers around her. Tell all of us what was the threat I posed by reading a novel. Her challenge hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Bishop was caught. He had expected tears, fear, a quick and quiet removal. He had not expected this articulate, fearless defiance. His fabricated excuse was crumbling under the barest scrutiny. He fell back on his only remaining defense, brute authority. I don't have to explain myself to you, he spat, his face inches from hers. You are a security risk on my ship. You are getting off this ship willingly, or I will have Port Authority drag you off. It's your choice. The threat was ugly and public. The businessman in the next room, who had initially been annoyed by the delay, was now looking at Bishop with disgust. For God's sake, man. She's a kid with a book. Leave her alone. This doesn't concern you. Bishop roared, his composure completely shattered. He pointed a trembling finger at Chloe. Her off now! It was then that Karen, the embarkation agent, appeared at the hallway entrance, her face a mask of anxiety. Captain, we have a problem. Departure is delayed. What's the situation? Bishop turned, seeing her as an instrument for his will. The situation is that I am removing a passenger. Have security meet me at the gangway. Chloe looked past Bishop's enraged face, past Elena's protective stance to the embarkation agent. She took a single deliberate step into the hallway. She wasn't moving toward the exit. She was claiming the territory. My name is Chloe Sinclair, she said, her voice carrying through the deck. I am a ticketed passenger on this cruise, and I have done nothing wrong. This captain is attempting to remove me from this ship based on what I can only assume is personal prejudice. I will not be disembarking. She then looked directly at Bishop. a flicker of something cold and powerful in her eyes. "But I assure you, Captain, you will not be sailing this ship today." It was a declaration of war. A 17-year-old girl had just challenged the absolute authority of a veteran cruise ship captain in front of his crew and 150 passengers. To Bishop, it was an unimaginable affront. To Chloe, it was simply the consequence of a line being crossed. And in her pocket, her phone was silent. But she could already feel the reassuring weight of the single contact stored in her favorites, Marcus Sinclair. The real power had not yet entered the fight, but the call was about to be made. The deck of Voyage 9 became a pressure cooker. The air, already thin, felt charged with a volatile tension. Passengers were no longer just annoyed. They were taking sides. A young man in a nearby room was live streaming the event, his phone held high, providing a hushed, breathless commentary. An older woman was loudly demanding to know if they would all miss their shore excursions. The businessman who had first defended Chloe was now arguing heatedly with another passenger who was shouting, "Just listen to the captain and get off the ship." In the middle of it all stood Chloe, an island of calm in a sea of chaos. She had not moved from the hallway. Her posture was relaxed, but her presence was immovable. Captain Bishop, on the other hand, was vibrating with rage. Chloe's public defiance had stripped him of his authority more effectively than any corporate reprimand ever could. He saw her not as a person, but as the embodiment of everything he despised, a challenge to his world order. "Karen, did you hear me?" Bishop yelled toward the gangway door. "Get Port Authority down here now. I want this woman arrested for interfering with the ship's crew." Karen, the embarkation agent, was trapped. Her manual dictated that she follow the captain's orders, but her conscience and the dozen phone cameras pointed in her direction screamed otherwise. "Captain, perhaps we should de-escalate. We can talk about this on the gangway." "The time for talking is over," he bellowed. It was then that Chloe took out her phone. The simple act seemed to cut through the noise. All eyes went to the device in her hand. Bishop scoffed. "Who are you calling? Your lawyer?" "It's too late for that." Chloe ignored him. She scrolled to a single entry in her contacts. "Dad." She pressed the call button. She didn't put the phone to her ear. Instead, she held it in her palm, looking at the screen as it rang. 1 second. 2 seconds. He answered. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. She simply angled the phone slightly, allowing its microphone to capture the toxic atmosphere of the deck. Bishop's continued shouting, the passengers' arguments, Elena's attempts to calm the situation. She let the phone listen for a full 30 seconds, a silent, damning testimony. Then she brought it to her ear. "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Sorry to bother you at work." A brief pause. "Yes, I'm on the ship, Voyage 9 at Port Canaveral." Another pause as she listened. "Well, there's a small issue with the captain. His name is Arthur Bishop." She looked directly at the captain as she said his name, her eyes holding no fear. "He's refusing to sail because he says I'm a security risk." "Yes, that's what he said." Bishop watched the exchange with a sneer. He assumed she was calling her father to complain. A futile gesture. He was the law here. No phone call to a concerned parent was going to change that. Chloe listened for another moment, a flicker of a sad smile on her face. "Okay, I understand." "No, I'm perfectly safe. The head of guest services, Elena, has been very professional." She nodded. "Okay, I'll wait. Love you too." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. The entire exchange had taken less than a minute. She looked at Bishop. "My father is going to make a few calls," she said simply. "I suggest we all wait." This was to Bishop the height of absurdity. "Your father?" He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Your father? Who is your father? The president? Let me tell you something, young lady. I don't care if your father is the CEO of this cruise line. On this ship, I am God." It was a shocking, hubristic declaration, and it was the last mistake he would make as a captain of Pinnacle Cruises. The standoff solidified. Bishop, refusing to back down, ordered all crew to remain at their stations. He wouldn't sail with her, but he wouldn't let anyone else leave either, effectively holding the passengers hostage to his ego. He retreated to the main galley, arms crossed, fuming as he waited for the Port Authority officers he was sure would vindicate him. Elena Ramirez stayed with Chloe, bringing her a bottle of water. "Are you all right?" she whispered. "I'm fine. Chloe answered, giving her a grateful look. Thank you for standing up for me. That took courage. It's my job to protect my passengers, Elena said, from any kind of threat. The unspoken words, even the captain, hung between them. Minutes stretched into an eternity. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The ship's door remained open to the gangway, and the air inside grew hot and stuffy. Karen, the embarkation agent, kept getting frantic calls on her radio, her face growing more and more pale. The expected Port Authority officers never arrived. Instead, Karen's radio crackled with a different kind of message, one from much higher up the chain of command. Her eyes widened as she listened. She looked from her radio to Captain Bishop, and then to the calm, waiting girl in the hallway. She walked hesitantly toward the captain. Captain Bishop, a call for you from Mr. Chen, the chief of operations at corporate. Bishop smirked, vindicated. Finally, the top brass were calling to back him up. He snatched the radio from her hand. Bishop here. The voice on the other end was tiny but frantic. Arthur, what in the hell is going on at Port Canaveral? I've got the entire executive board lighting up my phone. Just a minor security issue, Michael, Bishop said, his voice oozing confidence. A non-compliant passenger. I'm having her removed. The situation is under my control. There was a pause, and then Michael Chen's voice came back, stripped of all collegiality. It was cold, terrified. Arthur, listen to me very, very carefully. Who is the passenger you are trying to remove? Her name is Sinclair. Chloe Sinclair. Some entitled teenager who thinks... The COO cut him off with a strangled cry. Oh my God, Arthur, you fool! Do you know who that is? Do you have any idea who you just picked a fight with? Bishop's confidence began to waver. A small crack in his arrogant facade. She's a passenger, Michael. That's all that matters. No, that's not all that matters. Chen shrieked through the radio, his voice cracking with panic. Arthur, you need to apologize to that young woman right now. You need to get back into that bridge and get that ship in the ocean. Or so help me God, your career is over. Bishop stood frozen. The radio clutched in his hand. The ground was shifting beneath his feet. The world he understood, a world of hierarchies and unquestioned authority, was tilting on its axis. He looked over at Chloe, who was now quietly talking with Elena, and for the first time, a seed of genuine fear began to sprout in his gut. But before he could process the COO's panicked order, before he could even begin to formulate an apology, it was already too late. The dominoes had been pushed, and halfway across the country, in a sleek Fort Lauderdale high-rise, a man named Marcus Sinclair had just hung up the phone with his legal team and was dialing his new chief of operations with a single, chilling directive. The problem was no longer about one girl on one ship. It was about to become about every single ship in the Pinnacle Cruises fleet. The Pinnacle Cruises corporate headquarters in Fort Lauderdale was a monument to modern maritime operations. A massive real-time map of the United States covered one entire wall of the Central Operations Center, dotted with hundreds of tiny ship-shaped icons, each representing a vessel at sea. It was the nerve center of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, a place of controlled, predictable chaos. Michael Chen, the chief of operations, was a man who thrived on that control. He was a master of logistics, a conductor orchestrating a complex ballet of captains, ships, and passengers across 3 time zones. But the call he received at 10:17 a.m. Eastern Time shattered that control completely. The caller ID simply read, Monsieur Sinclair. Chen's blood ran cold. Marcus Sinclair, the reclusive, terrifyingly efficient billionaire who had just bought the cruise line, never called him directly. Communications went through layers of assistants and executive vice presidents. A direct call was the corporate equivalent of a nuclear alarm. Mr. Sinclair, Chen said, his voice betraying a tremor. To what do I owe the... Shut up and listen, Michael. Sinclair's voice was unnervingly calm, a quiet razor blade that promised a lethal cut. I have my daughter on the phone. She is on voyage 9115 at Port Canaveral, sitting at the gate. Her name is Chloe. She tells me your captain, a man named Arthur Bishop, is refusing to sail because she is, and I quote, a security risk. Is this an accurate summary of the situation? Chen's mind raced. Sinclair had a daughter. It wasn't public knowledge. The billionaire was fiercely private. He frantically typed Voyage 915 into his terminal. The incident report from the embarkation agent was popping up. Passenger dispute. Captain invoking command authority. Security requested. It was all there. Mr. Sinclair, I see the report. I can assure you we are handling... You are handling nothing. Sinclair cut in, his voice dropping even lower, colder. You are allowing a bigoted employee to harass a 17-year-old girl in front of a shipload of people. You are allowing your captain to publicly abuse a customer who also happens to be my child. This is not a customer service issue anymore, Michael. This is a demonstration of the corporate rot I was hired to excise. Chen was sweating now, his tailored suit suddenly feeling like a straitjacket. Sir, I am so sorry. I will call Bishop immediately. I will have him apologize. We'll get the ship in the ocean. I will handle Captain Bishop personally. He will be severely reprimanded. There was a long, terrible silence on the line. On the operations wall, the icon for Voyage 915 blinked innocently in Port Canaveral. No, Michael, Marcus Sinclair said finally. You won't, sir. Captain Bishop's employment is terminated, effective immediately. That's the first step. But that is not sufficient. A reprimand is not sufficient. An apology is not sufficient. I didn't buy this cruise line to trim the hedges. I bought it to burn out the disease. Today we perform surgery. Sir, what are you asking me to do? Chen whispered, already knowing the answer would be something unimaginable. I want you to recall all ships to port. The words didn't register at first. I'm sorry, sir. Recall the voyage? No, Michael. Sinclair's voice was now utterly devoid of emotion, the voice of pure, unassailable power. Recall the fleet. Every single Pinnacle ship on the ocean or at the dock. I want every ship in the United States to be issued a directive. If you are at the port, you do not depart. If you are at sea, you return to the nearest suitable port. Effective immediately. No exceptions. Michael Chen felt the world drop out from under him. Mr. Sinclair, respectfully, that's impossible. That's hundreds of sailings, tens of thousands of passengers. It will cost tens of millions of dollars. The logistical nightmare, the media. It will be catastrophic. The catastrophe already happened, Michael. It happened in the hallway of your ship at Port Canaveral. The cost of this action is a rounding error compared to the cost of allowing this culture to persist. You have 2 minutes to issue the order. If I do not have confirmation that the order has been given in 2 minutes, I will call the board and have you replaced with someone who will. The clock is ticking. The line went dead. Chen stared at his phone, his hand shaking. He looked at the giant map on the wall, at the hundreds of tiny ships charting their courses across the ocean. He was being asked to pull the plug on the entire system, to stop the heart of the cruise line. It was insane. It was corporate suicide. But the alternative, defying Marcus Sinclair, was personal suicide. He knew Sinclair was not bluffing. With a trembling hand, he slammed the red button on his console, the one reserved for national emergencies like a terrorist attack. The operations floor, which had been a hive of calm activity, fell silent. Every controller and dispatcher turned to look at him. This is Chen, he said, his voice speaking into the command microphone that broadcast to the entire center. By executive order of the chairman, issue a Level 1 fleet-wide grounding. I repeat, all Pinnacle Cruises ships are to return to port, effective immediately. All seaborne craft are to divert and dock. This is not a drill, panic erupted. Shouts of what? And are you serious? Filled the room. The lead port traffic controller ripped off his headset. Michael, you can't. We have ships over the middle of the Atlantic. We have ships on final approach to Los Angeles. You have your orders. Chen roared, his own panic turning to desperate anger. Execute them now. Back on Voyage 915, the atmosphere had become a bizarre waiting game. Captain Bishop was still fuming in the galley, refusing to acknowledge Chen's panicked order on the radio, convinced it was a bluff. He was waiting for security to arrive and prove him right. Chloe was back in her stateroom, the paperback open on her lap, though she wasn't reading. She was listening to the sounds of the port outside, waiting. Then a new sound began, the unmistakable ping of text message alerts. One phone, then another, then 5, then dozens. Passengers were looking at their phones with bewildered expressions. The man in the stateroom next to Chloe gasped. My wife, she's on a cruise to Alaska, he said to no one in particular. She just texted me. Her ship is turning around and docking in Seattle. A woman across the hall looked up from her screen, her face pale. My cruise to Bermuda, it just got canceled. They're telling everyone to disembark. Whispers turned to a roar of confusion. News alerts began to flash across screens. Pinnacle Cruises recalls entire U.S. fleet. Chaos at ports as Pinnacle Cruises sailings are halted nationwide. Captain Bishop finally emerged from the galley, his face a mask of disbelief. "What is this nonsense?" he demanded. It was Karen, the embarkation agent, who delivered the final blow. She walked onto the ship, holding her company-issued tablet, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. She didn't look at Bishop. She looked at Chloe with a newfound expression of sheer, unadulterated awe. "Captain Bishop," she said, her voice trembling. "It's over. They've recalled everything. Every single ship." She finally lifted her gaze to the captain. The order came from the chairman's office. They said the reason for the recall was a catastrophic failure of company culture, originating on Voyage 915. Bishop stared at her. Then his eyes darted to Chloe, the quiet teenager in the hoodie, the girl with the phone, the one who had called her dad. The sneer, the arrogance, the righteous fury. It all evaporated from his face, replaced by a dawning, sickening horror. He finally understood. He hadn't picked a fight with a passenger. He had picked a fight with the man who owned the ocean he sailed in. And in that moment, he knew with chilling certainty that he was already a ghost. He would never sit in the captain's seat of a cruise ship again. The god of Voyage 915 had just been struck down by a power he couldn't even comprehend. The command to recall the entire Pinnacle Cruises fleet rippled across the nation like a shockwave. At first, it was met with disbelief. Port Authority centers from Seattle to Miami were flooded with confused calls from Pinnacle Cruises captains. "Confirm last directive. Did you say return to port?" The answer was always the same. "Affirmative. Pinnacle 889. Divert to nearest suitable port. Acknowledge." Chaos bloomed in cruise ports nationwide. In Port Canaveral, Pinnacle's main hub, 27 ships waiting in line for departure suddenly powered down their engines, creating a logjam that would take days to clear. In Los Angeles, passengers on a fully boarded ship to Mexico were told to disembark with no explanation, their dream vacations evaporating on the dock. In Chicago, the Pinnacle Cruises terminals became a vortex of screaming children, furious business travelers, and overwhelmed embarkation agents who could only offer a helpless, "We're awaiting more information." The financial and logistical cost was staggering. Every minute the fleet was docked, Pinnacle Cruises hemorrhaged hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel, docking fees, crew salaries, and rebooking costs. The stock, which had surged after Marcus Sinclair's acquisition, began to plummet in after-hours trading as news of the unprecedented shutdown hit Wall Street. The media frenzy was instantaneous. News helicopters hovered over Port Canaveral. Their cameras zoomed in on the single stationary ship at the center of it all. Voyage 915. On board that ship, the passengers were no longer just participants. They were witnesses to history. They watched as the news alerts on their phones confirmed what was happening. Their localized drama had become a national crisis. Their gazes shifted constantly to Chloe Sinclair, who sat quietly in her stateroom now, the hallway beside her empty as people gave her a wide, respectful berth. She was no longer just a girl who had been wronged. She was the cause, the epicenter of the earthquake. Captain Arthur Bishop was a man hollowed out. The color had drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty gray pallor. He stood in the hallway, the tablet with the news alert still clutched in his hand, his knuckles white. His entire world, built on a foundation of seniority, authority, and perceived superiority, had been demolished in less than an hour by a quiet teenager and her father. Corporate security, not the Port Authority police he had demanded, finally arrived. They were two men in sharp suits, their faces grim and professional. They bypassed the passengers and crew, walking directly to Bishop. "Captain Bishop," the lead agent, a man named Harris, said, his voice low and devoid of any warmth. "We need you to come with us. Please collect your personal belongings from the bridge." Bishop didn't respond. He seemed to be in a state of shock. "Your sea bag, Captain," Harris repeated, a little firmer this time. Slowly, as if moving underwater, Bishop turned and walked toward the bridge. His swagger was gone. His shoulders were slumped. Every eye on the deck followed his slow, defeated march. Ryan Davis, the first officer, was standing just outside the bridge door, his face a miserable portrait of shame and regret. He wouldn't meet Bishop's eyes. Bishop brushed past him without a word, grabbed his bag, and walked back out. As the security agents escorted him to the door, Bishop paused one last time and looked at Chloe. His eyes were a storm of confusion, hatred, and a desperate, unspoken question. Why? Chloe met his gaze. There was no triumph in her expression, no satisfaction, only a profound, weary sadness. She gave a subtle, almost imperceptible shake of her head, as if to say, "It didn't have to be this way." He was escorted off the ship and down the gangway, a fallen king leaving his castle for the last time. The moment the door hissed shut behind him, a collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the deck. An announcement came over the PA system, not from the crew, but from a canned corporate recording. "Ladies and gentlemen, we sincerely apologize for the disruption. This voyage has been canceled. All Pinnacle Cruises operations have been temporarily suspended. Please disembark in an orderly fashion. Ground staff will assist you with rebooking and accommodations." As the passengers began to file out, tired and bewildered, Elena Ramirez approached Chloe. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "I've never seen anything like this." Chloe finally allowed herself a small, tired smile. "You were amazing, Elena," she said, her voice sincere. "You were the only one." "It was the right thing to do," Elena replied, though she was still reeling. "What happens now?" "Now," Chloe said, looking out the porthole at the flashing lights of news vans gathering on the dock. "The hard part begins. Now we fix it." Minutes later, a special black car pulled up directly on the dock. A breach of protocol only possible with the highest level of clearance. As Chloe disembarked, a member of Marcus Sinclair's personal security team met her at the bottom of the stairs. He led her to the car, shielding her from the prying lenses of the news cameras. As the car pulled away, Chloe looked back at the grounded Pinnacle star. It looked like a beached whale, inert and powerless. The cruise line's name, Pinnacle Cruises, was painted in bold blue letters on its tail. A bitter irony. One man's prejudice had brought the entire company to its knees. The unraveling was complete. Now came the reckoning. And for Arthur Bishop, the karma was just beginning to gather its formidable strength. For Arthur Bishop, the fall was not a gentle slope. It was a cliff edge. He was escorted by corporate security to a sterile, windowless room in the Pinnacle Cruises administrative offices at Port Canaveral. He was not questioned. He was not debriefed. He was simply handed a single-page letter by a stone-faced human resources executive. The letter was brutal in its efficiency. It stated that his employment with Pinnacle Cruises was terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct, endangerment of company reputation, and violation of the company's code of conduct and anti-discrimination policies. His final paycheck would be mailed. His health insurance would expire at midnight. Security would escort him to his car. He was to never again set foot on Pinnacle Cruises' property. But that was just the beginning. Marcus Sinclair was not a man who believed in half measures. He understood that simply firing Bishop was not enough. Bishop had to be made into an example, a corporate cautionary tale written in stone. The next morning, Pinnacle Cruises, under the direct guidance of Sinclair's legal team, filed a formal report with the U.S. Coast Guard and the Maritime Authority. The report was meticulously detailed, including sworn, notarized statements from Elena Ramirez, First Officer Ryan Davis, who, after a long night of soul-searching, had decided to tell the absolute truth, to save what was left of his conscience and career, and over a dozen passengers. It also included links to the viral videos of the confrontation, which had by then been viewed millions of times. The report didn't just cite a customer service dispute. It formally accused Captain Bishop of creating a hostile and dangerous situation on his ship through reckless and discriminatory behavior, a serious violation of federal maritime regulations regarding the duties of a captain in command. The Coast Guard launched an immediate investigation. Bishop's captain's license was suspended pending the outcome. This was the true kill shot. A fired captain could eventually find work on a smaller, less reputable cargo ship. A captain with a suspended or revoked license was a pariah. He couldn't even skipper a small fishing boat for a weekend hobby. His command had been permanently clipped. Bishop hired a lawyer, a bombastic man who promised to fight back, to sue for wrongful termination, to claim Bishop was the victim of a corporate witch hunt. They held a press conference. Bishop, looking haggard and defeated, read a prepared statement claiming his actions were based purely on security concerns, and that the passenger's identity was irrelevant. The public didn't buy it. The videos were too damning. His own words, "I am God on this ship," were played on a loop on every news channel. The media, fed information by Sinclair's ruthlessly efficient PR team, dug into Bishop's past. They found a history of minor complaints, mostly from female stewards and minority officers, all previously dismissed by a complacent old boys club management. The narrative was set. Arthur Bishop was not a victim. He was a relic of a bygone era of prejudice and unchecked power. His life disintegrated. His wife, a woman who had built her social standing on being a captain's wife, was humiliated. The country club they belonged to quietly suggested they resign their membership. His friends, many of them fellow captains, distanced themselves, afraid of being tainted by association in the new zero-tolerance Pinnacle cruises. He was financially ruined. His legal bills mounted, and with his income gone and his reputation destroyed, he was unemployable. The man who had commanded a 100,000-ton ship found himself unable to command the respect of a checkout clerk at the grocery store. The karma, however, was not just about Bishop's destruction. It was also about the elevation of others. Elena Ramirez was called to the Fort Lauderdale headquarters. She walked into the meeting expecting a formal reprimand for defying her captain. Instead, she found herself sitting across a boardroom table from Marcus Sinclair and Chloe. Sinclair was an intense, imposing figure, but he spoke to her with genuine respect. "Ms. Ramirez," he began, "what you did on that ship, defending a passenger against your superior at personal risk. That is the true culture of Pinnacle. That is the standard." He then offered her the position of Vice President of Import Services and Training, a massive promotion. Her first task was to personally oversee the design and implementation of a new mandatory conflict resolution and de-escalation program for all 30,000 Pinnacle Cruises employees, to be named the Ramirez Initiative. She was no longer just a guest services manager. She was a leader, tasked with ensuring that what happened on Voyage 915 would never happen again. Ryan Davis, the first officer, was not fired. His inaction was noted, but his subsequent full, honest cooperation with the investigation was valued. He was placed on administrative leave and required to complete the first session of the new Ramirez Initiative. He returned to the bridge months later, a changed man, humbled, more aware, and determined to never again be a silent bystander to injustice. Pinnacle Cruises remained recalled for a full 72 hours. It was an unprecedented, financially devastating move that became a legend in business schools. But it worked. When the cruises resumed, the message was crystal clear to every single employee. The old way of doing things was over. The company was now built on a foundation of respect, and the cost of violating that foundation was absolute. For Bishop, the final crushing blow came 6 months later. The Maritime Authority concluded its investigation. His captain's license was not just suspended, it was permanently revoked. The reason cited was a demonstrated lack of sound judgment and moral character required to hold the public trust as a master mariner. The news found him working as a dispatcher for a small local trucking company, earning 1/10 of his former salary. He was a ghost in a headset, routing trucks through the night. A man who once commanded the oceans now confined to a dingy, fluorescent-lit office. He had refused to share his small piece of the ocean with a teenage girl, and in return, karma had taken the entire ocean away from him forever. 1 year later, The new Pinnacle Cruises was almost unrecognizable from its former self. The stock had not only recovered, but had soared to new heights. Passengers, won over by the company's dramatic and public commitment to customer respect, had returned in droves. The cruise line became a case study in radical corporate transformation. The recall, once seen as a catastrophic act of self-destruction, was now hailed as a masterstroke of rebranding. The Ramirez initiative was a resounding success. Elena Ramirez, now a respected executive, had revolutionized the line's training, shifting the focus from rigid procedure to empathetic problem-solving. Pinnacle Cruises became known for having the best-trained, most empowered onboard crews in the industry. Chloe Sinclair chose not to fade into the background. Deeply affected by her experience, she deferred her college acceptance for a year. With her father's full backing, she established the Pinnacle Foundation, a nonprofit wing of the cruise line dedicated to providing scholarships and maritime training for aspiring officers and maritime professionals from underrepresented communities. She wanted to ensure the future of sailing looked more like the passengers it served. The story closes at a Pinnacle Cruises pier in Port Canaveral, where the foundation is celebrating its first class of scholarship recipients. It's a diverse, brilliant group of young men and women, their faces bright with hope, all standing before a gleaming new cruise ship. Chloe, now 18, stands at a podium addressing the crowd of new students, families, and media. She is no longer the anonymous girl in a hoodie, but she hasn't adopted the stiff persona of a corporate heir either. She is poised, her voice filled with a quiet passion that commands attention. "A year ago," she begins, "on a ship just like this one, a man drew a line. He decided who belonged and who didn't. He decided his power gave him the right to judge, to exclude, and to humiliate. He thought he was defending his world. But his world was small, and it was fragile, and it was built on fear. What he failed to understand is that the ocean doesn't belong to any one person. It belongs to everyone. It is the great connector, the place of infinite possibility." She gestures to the aspiring officers behind her. "The real power isn't in keeping people out. It's in lifting people up. That's what we are going to do today. We are not just launching careers. We are launching a new idea of what it means to ascend together." As applause echoes through the cavernous terminal, the camera finds a final distant shot. A local news report is playing on a small, dusty television in the break room of a trucking depot. It shows Chloe at the podium, a confident young leader. A man in a grease-stained uniform watches the screen for a moment. It's Arthur Bishop. He looks older, his face etched with bitterness and regret. He sees the world that moved on without him, the industry that he loved now being shaped by the very girl he tried to cast out. He doesn't say a word. He just turns away from the screen, picks up his headset, and disappears back into the anonymous drone of his new life, forever grounded. The world had ascended, leaving him far, far below. The story of Chloe Sinclair and Arthur Bishop is a powerful reminder that true authority isn't found in a title or a uniform, but in character and integrity. One man's prejudice, born from arrogance, created a storm that brought an entire cruise line to a standstill. But from that chaos, one young woman's quiet courage and one leader's decisive action sparked a revolution of accountability. It shows that no one is too powerful to face the consequences of their actions, and that the karma that follows hate is as swift and sure as gravity itself. This wasn't just about one cruise. It was about the direction of our entire society. If this story of dramatic justice resonated with you, please help us share it. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where karma delivers the final, unforgettable verdict. What did you think of Marcus Sinclair's extreme measures? Let us know in the comments below.